Buddy. Can you hear me? Does the sound okay? All right, good. Good to see everybody. Um, and let's see, this evening, um, I wanted to talk a bit about Thich Nhat Hanh, who died a couple of weeks ago. I'll begin by saying that we are living in a time of the efflorescence of Buddha Dharma. It has in the last century emerged in the Western world as a major force for spiritual cultivation. And this is largely the effect of the teachings by several major teachers, one of whom was Thich Nhat Hanh. And I would also say the Dalai Lama and Pema Chodron. These are kind of the primary bearers of the gifts of Dharma to the broad population. A lot of people have heard of these teachers and have heard their teachings. Even though there are also a myriad other teachers in several streams of Buddhism, and our center emerged from one of those. So this is an age in the Western countries of God is dead. And it's hard to know whether the sensibility that develops out of steady Buddhist practice, which is guided by its ethical underpinnings of interdependence, impermanence, and no lasting separate self. It's hard to know whether this practice will be able to steady and balance this civilization that we're living in. A civilization that's based in materialistic values and has little use for spiritual values. Materialistic values that where there really is a belief in the actuality of money, which is it's a shared, agreed upon standard, which has no actual basis. And greed and competition and the denial of death permeates our culture. So any spiritual teaching that can relate to the real conditions of our life and also bring relief to the inner sanctum of our hearts is a great treasure. Even though official Buddhists comprise only 1% of the population of the United States, population in 2020, which was 329.5 million people. Even though officially we're only 1% of this population, it is moving into the mainstream slowly but surely through the teachings of mindfulness. And Thich Nhat Hanh's first book was The Miracle of Mindfulness. No, that was not his first, but that was the first major one. So tonight I'd like to share some insights into this way of life that I received from Thich Nhat Hanh. This awareness continues to guide my own view even now, years later. He is a beloved teacher. Thich Nhat Hanh was known affectionately by his students as Thai. And he's the one who popularized the term interbeing. Now, this is the way that Thai phrased the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination. But interbeing is now used far and wide by people who may not even recognize that it's a Buddhist concept, Buddhist term, shared by all the physical sciences. So this teaching of dependent origination is basically that no phenomenon has independent existence. Whatever is comes into existence because of factors and conditions created by other phenomena. And when conditions no longer support that existence, then that thing ceases to exist. So this, I had a question recently from somebody about the existence of a soul. And this is where Buddhist teachings depart from those spiritual traditions that talk about a soul. So the Buddha stated this dependent origination this way. He said, when this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't. From the sensation of this comes the cessation of that. The way that this is stated suggests that the translation was done by Thich Nhat Hanh, because he often quoted this particular way of describing interbeing. So during one of his talks, Thai offered an example of interbeing in his usual simple and poetic style. So he said, if you are a poet, you will clearly see that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there will be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. And without trees, we cannot make paper. The cloud is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not here, the sheet of paper cannot be here either. So we can say that the cloud and the paper inter-are. So this is a classic Thich Nhat Hanh statement, and a lovely rendering of the teaching of dependent origination, interbeing. Interbeing is a catchier way. It's a much more modern lingo form of dependent origination. It really caught on, interbeing. It's much more easily adopted by those who are looking for something to describe how interrelated everything is. If you begin with any one object, you can trace the entire world to it by following it out. So I participated in a number of retreats with Thich Nhat Hanh. And during one of them, he told a very powerful story that has stuck with me and continues to remind me that every moment is benefited when the mind is calm and stable. I've shared this with a number of you already, but I love this story, so here it comes again. Maybe you haven't heard it before. During the war in Vietnam, Thai was part of a group of religious leaders that attempted to bring about peace talks. And he was pretty well known and was part of an international group, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, who were also hard at work at this, as were the Quakers and a number of other groups. So when he was taken prisoner by pirates who had been commandeering the small boats that the people who were attempting to flee Vietnam were on, he was taken prisoner by pirates. And knowing how important Thai was, the pirates realized they had a valuable commodity, and they got in touch with the French government with a demand for ransom. Thai thought it was unlikely that the French would pay any ransom. He was locked in a closet in the pirates' boat, along with mops and ropes. And there was room in that closet for one step in any direction. So for a number of hours, For a number of hours, Thai practiced walking meditation. one step, to steady his mind and to quiet his energies. He knew that this might turn out to be the only thing that would save his life, his quality of mind, maintaining equanimity, not getting caught up in fear, but maintaining a concentrated simplicity, the simplicity that comes with taking one step, turning, one step, turning, one step, turning, one step, one mindful step, in one direction, in the other direction, in the next direction, and back again. This is such a visceral teaching. And as he was telling it, quite slowly, it was, I think everybody present was taken into that closet with him. And the depth of vow that he was living by taking one step. So the wisdom of this one-step practice is clear. We only ever have one step at a time. And it's up to us, two things. First, to realize that, to really appreciate that. It's true. We just take one step at a time. We take one breath at a time, one moment at a time. That's the truth. And then realizing it's also our responsibility for how we take those steps, how we approach each step. We can decide how we use it, whether to stay in tune with just this very moment, stay open and present as the best way to approach anything in our life, any kind of trouble, is to remain open. Trouble, problems, criticism, it's all the First Noble Truth, the truth of difficulties and dissatisfaction and trouble. Whatever kidnaps our attentions and holds us for ransom. I just had to use that image. Whatever it is. Mostly, of course, we don't encounter such dire circumstances and conditions the way that Ty was. But the underlying potential is always with us, to be held up in a tiny closet of fear and confusion and dread and desperate mind. We can't know what influence Ty's practice in that tiny closet that day had on what happened to all the rest of the people in the boat with him. But we are always now influencing what's going on around us, just as he was. He was approaching that moment of great danger with a collected mind and a deep vow for himself and for all beings. We're always influencing what's going on around us. This is the meaning of the Bodhisattva vow. And this story so beautifully demonstrates it. We are never alone, whether it's with people, animals, plants. The quality of our mind and heart has consequences beyond our knowing, even as it also determines our own experience. You know, your state of mind. How does it feel to be you with each state of mind that you traverse, that you travel through and with? I came to know Thich Nhat Hanh through Robert Aitken Roshi, who was my first teacher. They were friends and were part of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And as fellow practitioners who were engaged in addressing the Vietnam War situation, Aitken Roshi and several others started the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, which continues to this day. And they sponsored Thich Nhat Hanh's first retreat in this country, and many of them thereafter. Thay's emphasis on engaging our lives actively as bodhisattvas has influenced generations of Zen practitioners in the US. We're all in networks of communities that affect the general well-being and how we show up in them. How we conduct ourselves is an essential part of our practice. That walking meditation became a focus of Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching. During the retreats that I did with him, there was always walking meditation. Not in the Japanese Zen style, but in the Thich Nhat Hanh Vietnamese style. We always walked as a group together, all together in a big bunch, holding hands. Holding hands. And this experience of holding hands during walking affected deeply the experience of Sangha. Being a Sangha where our bodies are actually touching, not just conceptually, but physically, had a really strong effect on the experience. And as I talk about this, another of Thay's teachings is brought to mind, and that has to do with Maitreya Buddha, the Buddha of future births. He often said that the Sangha is Maitreya Buddha. The seeds for future Buddhas is found in the present Sangha. The seeds for whole and complete Buddha mind, self-realizing, comes through Sangha. It's not a solitary achievement. And the care that we take in Sangha for the practice is what this way of life is all about. Aitken Roshi, Thay's good friend and my first dear teacher, said that we join with our brothers and sisters in cultivating each moment as a Dharma treasure. And all of us have come to know that to a certain extent and variously. We're not that together physically yet, again. We will be shortly. But not only practicing together, but working together, taking care of the center together, taking care of the garden together. All of that is the treasure. Step by mindful step, we're always taking the next step together with all beings. We're always breathing each breath together with all beings. This is the teaching and realization of codependent arising, interbeing. We are not alone. Fundamentally, we are not alone. We can easily meditate for years on our own without awakening to the full teaching of interbeing. Sangha demonstrates the full teaching. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are always arising together. Every moment expresses this truth. Our personal self arises and is maintained through the activity of all of life, the Sangha of all beings. We can't awaken apart from all beings because we are not alone. We've had a worldwide lesson from COVID Bodhisattva, which is kind of ironic, but it has just demonstrated so vividly and continues to the undeniable connection of all life and the mysterious pathways that life travels. Even before our very eyes, there's so much of it that we don't see. But we are not alone. So this brings me to share a poem in conclusion that I got from a friend. And if it's true, we are not alone. We are alone together. I'm sorry. If it's true, we are alone. We are alone together. The way blades of grass are alone, but exist in a field. Sometimes I feel it, the green fuse that ignites us, the wild thrum that unites us, an inner hum that reminds us of our shared humanity. Just as 35 trillion red blood cells join in one body to become one blood. Just as 136,000 notes make up one symphony. Alone as we are, our small voices weave into the one big conversation. Our actions are essential to the one infinite story of what it is to be alive. When we feel alone, we belong to the grand communion of those who sometimes feel alone. We are the dust that hopes, a rising of dust, a thrill of dust, the dust that dances in the light with all other dust, the dust that makes the world. So we have received this wonderful transmission freshly from Thich Nhat Hanh, and we honor him tonight in remembering his contribution, his support, and his inspiration for all of us, directly and indirectly in our own practice. So may we all live with full awareness of interbeing, and take care. Thank you.